Hello, and welcome to a new episode of our podcast. Today we're back for Whispers of Inner Power interview, and I'm so happy to be joined by Ruth Cooper-Dickson. Ruth is the creator of Thrive Ship Coaching, a positive psychology approach that supports people through adversity, grief, anxiety, and burnout. She's an award-winning practitioner, trauma-informed coach, breathwork leader, broadcaster, and she's currently writing a book on post-traumatic growth. Ruth, hello. I see you're reacting to your own bio.
I love it. I'm like hyping myself up here, right? When do we ever hype ourselves up?
Yes, I've done all that.
It's a good reminder. Like, I love it when I do corporate programs and people do the intro, and I'm like, yeah, just keep going. This is great. Like, we need to be reminded of these things.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm really happy that you're here today.
Yeah,
how are
me
you?
Too. I'm good. I've just recorded I was a guest on a coaching psychology podcast because I'm in Dublin next week presenting my research at the European Conference of Positive Psychology. I'm actually presenting my published research and also a program I've been working on with classical musicians, which has been really fascinating. So yeah, it's been a heavy, intensive Ruth talk morning, but I'm all good. I'm prepared for this. So yeah.
So cool. And we've been talking for a while before actually being able to do this. So yes, I can feel the anticipation as well. Okay, so let's dive into it. I always love to start with the beginning because your work is rooted in lived experience as much as research. So can you take us back a little? What brought you to this work specifically?
So, my own lived experience was with my own mental ill health journey. So that was 11 years ago, around about now, not far off now. So 11 years ago, I had what I called a very public meltdown. It technically was a panic attack in my CEO's office at work. I'd lived with panic attacks for about 2 decades. I'd never told anyone. They started when I was 19, when I went into corporate life. Meetings actually was what triggered them, but I actually didn't even know this. This was all stuff that's come out afterwards, but they weren't at school. They weren't in sixth form. They happened when I started work, and I kept them very secretive. I had these most elaborate coping strategies, avoidance mechanisms to deal with them. And when that happened, I was diagnosed then. I was very fortunate. I got help very quickly. I was very unwell. I was in a very dark place as well. And I'll never forget my therapist, who was via the NHS, and I was very lucky here in the UK to have that support. It doesn't always happen that quickly, or that, with that sort of support. And I was diagnosed with panic disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. And that was basically then the start of my recovery healing journey of like the last 11 years. So that involved me suddenly deciding to quit my job with no plan. I was broke because I'd just gone through a divorce. And I didn't even have a business plan, right? I just wanted to change the conversation around mental health at work. So I left and thought, this is what I want to do. And I had a network. I'd worked in the city. I'd had a big corporate career in investment banking, wealth management, aerospace. And yeah, that's where I went. And over the years, like, I think I'd always been fascinated with, sort of the idea of resilience and performance, and wellness was definitely part of who I was as well, and kind of bringing all that together. I retrained. I grew a very large consultancy, and then with my own diagnosis of being neurodivergent, which came at the end of 2022, blew everything up. I had 3 businesses at one point, social enterprise, a private practice, very big corporate consultancy. And 2023 was my art of shedding, as I described it, and just basically stripped everything back. And interestingly, the grief work particularly came about the last couple of years. Like grief, I've read about this on my Substack. It's probably it's how I've been brought up. My dad died when I was 6 in a car accident, and my life changed absolutely beyond then. my mum was is one of the toughest people I've ever met. I mean, she'd also lost her dad, her brother not long before I was born. Then she lost her husband, and just how she is, the person she is just phenomenal, and really instilled into me a couple of things: that life was not a dress rehearsal, for one, and secondly, like just really understanding grief at a really young age, and kind of like how I would tackle that. And then I did have lots of bereavements even as a teenager, so I was exposed to death, I suppose, very early on, but always been really comfortable with death. And yeah, I think looking at all the work I've done, so my area of expertise is what's called post-traumatic growth. Like, how do we thrive or grow from going through adverse life experiences? And that's what my published research is in. And I suppose all the areas I've tended to work, not only in corporate industry, because that's where I do a lot of my work day to day, but I've worked, for 4 years, I had a program that supported women who'd experienced domestic abuse and violence, as it kind of was called, so DVA, and kind of thriving on the back of having had that experience and coming into a coaching room, very clear that is part of what they're bringing into that space, although we're not working on that. It's kind of the other aspects of life. And that came on the back of a piece of research that I found when I was doing my own thesis. So I suppose I've always described myself as a coach with broad shoulders because of all the mental health work I've done. And I've been really fortunate that I've been brought into spaces where psychiatrists, psychologists have worked, in parallel with me or trained me, and know that I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counsellor. I've got people that I coach who are in both camps, and I think that sometimes that's really supportive and helpful, and quite often I get referrals that way. But yeah, it's just been a really interesting journey of like where it's taken me. Like, breathwork came about because of my own coping strategy of navigating sort of panic attacks and the somatic side of holding trauma and finding a release that's embodied release. I've been a patron of one of the anxiety charities in the UK now since 2018, which is a big thing for me. So there's been lots of things that kind of come together. They all kind of make sense, but it's sometimes really hard to say it depends on the audience what I'm talking about, what I do. I think it's just, I've not been ever afraid to just throw myself into all different types of projects and programs and working people. I worked with humanitarian aid workers for 4 years. I spent time in the field during COVID when everyone was at home. I was out in Greece and working in a refugee camp and supporting workers out there. I think there's been very much an element for me of finding people that need that support, also who may not have access to it. And I think that's also been something that I've recently done with the classical musicians. This was positive psychology coaching, but it was for a group of people that rarely have the funds to be able to pay for this type of support, and it was completely pro bono. I make money from a lot of great places and I make good money. I'm very privileged in that respect, but also I spend a lot of my time because I don't have millions to give away. And if I did, I'd be, philanthropy and just giving out so much. But for me, that's a big part of giving back. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a big part of who I am. It always has been. So yeah, if I can donate time or skills, I'm all for that. And I spend probably at times to my own detriment, but all the humanitarian aid work, all the women's programs, the classical music work, all of that is, that's all been pro bono. So yeah.
Thank you so much for this full answer, and I can really see the depth of it, because it's about the origin story as well. Like everything where you are now, what you've been doing, I can really hear this theme of having experienced it and wanted to give that support to people who have also experienced it. Because if you have a skill, if you know how to support them, then you want to do that for them. So that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think a lot of the people listening that have been through loss, a parent, a relationship, a version of themselves, sometimes grief is that, they've done something I've done myself. functional grieving. So you go to therapy, you get to a place where you can carry on. I feel so guilty of saying that because I'm like, yes, I did exactly that. And you think, okay, I've done the work, or I've done enough of the work to be functioning. But grief has a way of living in us that we don't always see. What would you say that unprocessed grief actually looks like? What are the signs from the outside?
I think this is really interesting at the moment because someone reached out to me, on a friend of mine on Facebook Messenger last month, May, and they work in the funeral industry. And they sent me a message, which was just really random, about they're really concerned because they're seeing so many people now who, for financial reasons, are making the choice of what we call direct crematorium. So basically, like, no service, no, not even a funeral or any kind of ritual. And they actually put in this message, like, I'm really worried this is going to have a long lasting impact because there is no way to grieve. And actually I was with, and then it was weird because I had that message. And then a few days later, I met through a mutual friend. Me and this person had met before, but they are a funeral celebrant, and they've recently retrained in also a kind of a ritual grief process, which is from, I think it's from Africa, but I might be wrong in that. But it's definitely like an idea of like, how do we have a ritual around grief? And I had the same conversation, and we were basically saying that, you know, so not only do we think about grief as something that's got to be healed, like, so I think that is a misconception about grief in itself, right? And I think, to your point of, we do the work if we are struggling and we need that support to make sense of our own feelings and emotions, and to be able to process that with a professional, whether that is a therapist or a counselor, whether that is a coach who is appropriately qualified to hold that space as well, and to be able to work on the more practical sense of like some of the support around grief. But I think it's something that we kind of expect to disappear, and yet it doesn't. And I'm reading this. I've just started reading this book yesterday that was recommended to me, and I can't remember for the life of me now what it's called. But it's by a psychotherapist, and it's like a really old book. And this idea of like the fact grief, the opening chapter, which I read on the train on the way into London, is basically this idea of like how we kind of have this misconception of grief being something that has to be healed and done with, and, like you said, boxed away and, you know, processed. But my dad died 41 years ago this year, or 42 years ago this year. And I think about my dad every day. Like, I think about my dad's photos on my dresser, and when I see a magpie, I think of my dad. And if I do anything big, like, my dad is with me. And like, you know, there's parts, there's times, if there's a film with someone's parent dies, I'm bawling my eyes out. I mean, that happened in Masters of the Universe, He-Man, maybe the week. And spoiler alert, if anyone's going to watch such a trash, it's a ridiculous movie, but I love those kind of movies. And the dad dies. I'm like, oh my God, why is it always the dad? But I just think there's something about, like, there is signs when, I think it's also when you feel life can't go on. And I think definitely, you know, grief, whether it's a bereavement or whether it's another form of loss. And I went through quite a lot in the back end of second half of 2023, and so many different elements of different types of grief, relationship breakdown, pet loss. I had to make the decision on losing my home. I'd also been diagnosed at the back end of 2022, so the beginning of 2023, being neurodivergent. I blew up my businesses. I lost so much, and no wonder I was in such a dark place. And I've experienced wanting to not be here anymore, without triggering kind of language, like not wanting to be here anymore in the past, and worked through that and had professional help. I know it's kind of something that I might end up going through, and so I ended up having professional support to be able to work through that. And so I think there's like a time when you just know that if you're in that place where you're stuck and it's really impacting chronically. And also it's normal to have those senses of grief and to feel that loss right at different points. But it's when it's all, for me, it's like when it's all encompassing, when it's really affecting who you are, how you're showing up in life, the relationships you have, how well you feel. I mean, we know there is what is prolonged grief, right, where someone is not able, and also complex grief as well, where there could be lots of kind of stories and nuance that's happening underneath the initial death or loss, which can be much more deeper if someone perhaps had a very difficult relationship with that individual, or it's tied to, another form of identity, as you described about. There is so much there that a therapist, counsellor, psychiatrist, whoever it is that you're working with, for whatever depth of support that you need and type of support, is able to unpack that with you in a way that's safe and to make sense of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, go on.
No, I was going to say, I like how you've expressed that and shown us. It's not a problem to be grieving. The problem that where you need support is where you can't go on with your life. Then you need to absolutely do something about it. But it's not about not being sad, like you say. And I think what I've experienced in the last 2 years, so I lost my dad in early July 2024. And it was a complex relationship. I was just joking about this with my husband yesterday, because I said, there's grief and then there's complex grief. And I think for me, it's definitely complex grief. And then there's trauma and there's complex trauma. And I've done that too. You can't do anything easy. You have to have the complex version. One. It's already hard like it is, but let's make it complex,
Yeah. And it's funny because I've started to do even more corporate work mental health and wellbeing is predominantly what I've done for the last 11 years, right? In big global organizations, law firms, insurers, those types of organizations. And grief is something that is yet to be really tackled. I've been starting that now for about the last 12, 18 months. And just even reviewing like grief policies, like some organizations don't really they have compassionate leave, but it's very much down to the manager to figure out like what someone might need. And, to your point, we think about the initial stage of grief and, for example, take a bereavement. So I might need some time off for, the funeral and sorting out maybe death admin, as you want to call it that. But then after that, like what happens? And I've spent 11 years training managers, leaders on having mental health and wellbeing conversations, because in lots of places that is not part of the management curriculum, or hasn't been. And it never was. Like, it was never expected as a manager you would have those conversations, really. It was, that's personal stuff. It's not work stuff. But we know now, I mean, in the UK, we've got a charity called Sue Ryder, and they did some really interesting research that says if someone goes through a bereavement, that they're likely only to be up to, I think it's about 70% of their capacity in the first 6 months. Like, you think about all the impacts that grief has, the brain fog, the memory, the cognitive, the emotional, the physical impact, because it's a stressor, and if you're caring and supporting others that are grieving and doing the holding for other people in the family, or trying to be supportive if you've got children, if it's a parent that's died, there's so many complexities to that. And it's not something that is easily boxed off and that just disappears. And recognizing that actually it's when people stop checking in, and we were having this conversation offline, but it's like further down the line, right? It's like the 6-12 months in where actually someone is still really struggling, because and people stop checking in because life continues for them as normal. And what do you mean you're not over it? Or like, oh, that was ages ago. That wasn't that ages ago. And these are I think I'm not surprised anymore with what people say to each other, because it's happened to me, but it happens to all my clients, where they're sort of given that information, or those kind of throwaway comments that people don't like it. We don't talk in the West culture. We don't talk about death. We don't talk about death from a positive aspect of living well. That's why I love going to death cafes, because I leave so on a high after going to a death cafe, as in I really want to make the most of life. Like I leave so enthused about just making the most of every moment.
Wait. What is a death cafe?
Oh my God. So death cafe started in the UK, and they're not a grief therapy space, circle, grief circle, anything like that. The idea is you come together to talk about death in an open way. And every death cafe I've been to, it's been random people, and you get people who are perhaps experiencing a bereavement or have, as you said, it's a universal human experience, right, of loss. But there's people there who are funeral celebrants, or people who work in the care system or hospice, or people just interested to go and talk to someone about what it means to die. Because I think this is the point. We only talk about death when someone is terminally ill, or we kind of thinking about we must do a will, or where we are, or we've died. That's the only time. Like, we don't have these kind of open conversations that are, because it's almost like if I talk about it, I'm going, and I've had someone say this: if I talk about it, I feel like I'm tempting fate. We're like talking about something bad. I'm like, it kind of doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
You have to name the unspeakable, right? Name the unnamed. Don't. But so it's really important. And I think because I've always been around it, like it's never been something that I've not grown up with. And also my mum working as a midwife and a nurse, like, these are part of the conversation she would share from work, and like life and death, and so it's just I think it reminds me that time is always so short. And I think this is what humans, as we know, we often really struggle with impermanence. Nothing is ours forever. And I'm fascinated with space. I'm a big space nerd. And, just when you think about how insignificant we are significant in ourselves, and we can have an impact, but in the scheme of the universe, and like how short our time is. Like these are the things we've got to be making the most of. And that's literally what I came off the last podcast saying, like, I just want to have all the stories. I just want to go out there and just do as much as I can in the time that I'm here for.
Yeah.
Like So
that makes total sense. And it leads really well into my next question. I was going to talk about, how it shows up sometimes when, or in business, but also when not. We're talking to people who are in business here, so I go with business. But something I noticed, and I did that. So when my father passed 2 years ago, I also turned 40. Bam! And it made me want to grip harder. So work harder. Actually, I had been on a sabbatical of 2 years. I was a stay-at-home mom before that for 2 years. And we had discussed with my husband, this would go on for 5 years total. But at that time, I was like, no. I need to work. I need to build my career again. I need to live my life. I need to build something for myself. And it made me work harder, control more myself. And you were speaking earlier about when we have little ones. I have 2 kids and I homeschool them. So I'm also like, the fact of homeschooling them, I'm always with them. So I felt very responsible for the energy I was giving. And honestly, for the first 6 months, what energy was I? I was a puddle, right? But even now I can feel like, when it hits me again, and you were talking about an example, you see a movie with a dad that dies, that's it. And I try also to like not always cry in front of them. And I'm really okay with vulnerability and with showing that, tears and sadness and grief is part of life. But I also know how they take it in. I can see immediately in their eyes, they're like, mommy's not well. And then they worry, and I'm like, but it's their life. It's their everyday. They have only us because we are homeschooling. And so I want to also, anyways, all of that to say, in the end, is that a pattern that you often see, grief that shows up maybe as a hustle sometimes, or that we cannot rest, or we want to control more ourselves, the environment, outcomes, just add a little story there. This year, in 2026, in January, we had a storm. I'm in the center of Portugal. We had a storm that devastated my city. Like, we had no electricity or water for 7 days. And this triggered the unprocessed grief, because I have zero control on life and on who dies somehow.
Yeah, I think, what is in and out of our control is huge, right? I think if we could all learn that skill early on. I mean, that's it. Humans love to be in control. The brain loves to be in control. You know, it doesn't like it. If we don't know the answer, it's why we make assumptions, right? Our brain fills in the gaps. It's quicker and easier to do that and to kind of make up the story as we go as well. So yeah, if things are in and out of our control, and to hold on tighter, and that is something that comes up all the time, about what is in my control. And I think there's a balance, isn't there? There's a balance of being able to let go, but also not to feel that it's overwhelmed, like for people that it's not overwhelming. And I think this idea of, to your point about not wanting to deal with grief, I see that come up whereby it's been like where someone perhaps comes to me as a coach, and then that is part of what is kind of been going off, but they don't necessarily come for that reason, but it's the busyness. And I think this is always true what people say about coming to a breathwork class, is that I'm going to cry and lose control. Yeah, they think about, because it's the holotropic breathwork that I teach. So the conscious connected breathing, the mouth breathing, which has been proven to have, that kind of transcendental experience as well for some people. And Stanislav Grof, the psychotherapist, used it with his patients. That's where holotropic, the brand of holotropic breathwork came from, like to process feelings, emotions that were in the body that words couldn't be put to, or that people just get fed up of talking, right? I remember just going to my GP saying, there's nothing for me to talk about. Why am I still getting these panic attacks? I've literally emptied everything out. Yeah. So I think, but people will, afraid. They're afraid of not being in control. They're afraid of crying and losing, that all coming out. Because for me, it's like, well, who's going to help me put that back together again? That's like a big thing, right? So if I even open this little box up that I've compartmentalized and pushed to one side, what am I going to do with it when I open it? And I think that is part of it, because we know, you and I know, we've been there and done that work. That takes energy, effort. It takes time. It takes money in lots of cases. It takes a support network. Like, one of my questions as a coach, and I've got other peers that work in this space who will say, what's your resource support network like? Because you have access to me 1 hour, a month, or twice a month, or whatever the contracting is. But who's supporting you when you're, if you're going to do this work, who's got your back? Because I think that's something that often, isn't, because if you're doing the work, how do you process? You have that 1 hour. Where's the rest of the time, when you're doing it, thinking it through, doing the homework, et cetera, making those changes, getting it wrong, trying things out, being brave, being curious, like who's got your back? And that's, all of that stuff is a lot. People are isolated, people don't have the money. To your point, I'm really, me, it's just me. I have no children, I live alone, no pets. I'm just an island. I have a partner for 1 year now on Friday.
Congrats.
Yay, congrats. He stayed. But yeah, I think it's really, it's a lot to do the work. It's so hard to do, I can see why people don't. And I've said this to someone who's a friend of mine who's been in this space for a long time. I'm like, sometimes don't you just wish you had oblivion? Like, you just pretended you didn't know all this stuff. Because the fact you need to go and do it makes it, like, 2023, I was like, oh, God, I'm really going to have to dig in and do this now, because I know what I should do. And I did to your point, I did all the right things. I took time off. My business nearly went under because of it, because I just was doing the transactional stuff. But I put myself first, which I've never done ever. But it's like, oh, it's such hard. why is everything such hard work?
Yeah. But that's also very important to mention. It is not easy.
No.
And so when you are, and it's not easy to do the work around grief. It's not easy to do self-growth work either.
Oh, God,
and healing from childhood trauma, whatever you've been through, all of that self-healing, self-growth, self-development, however you want to call it, that journey of feeling better in life. It's hard. It is difficult. And I think most of the people that listen to this podcast and work with me are doing the work. And I want to take this moment to really take it in and give yourself a tap on the shoulder, because you are being brave. You're doing amazingly for just choosing to do the work. And yes, sometimes it shows up at really messy and it's hard and you don't want to do it. And other times it's maybe a bit better, but you're doing it. That's the path. You're walking the path, and that's just amazing.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? I don't think there's never this circle. This is like the full circle back to your original question, which is, I don't think there's ever a point where I think I'm in the era right now where I feel like I've done so much, and the last couple of years particularly, and friends that are close to me and people that work for me now, I have a bigger team again, and my partner, etc. Like, people know I've done my family know that I've done, like, the last couple of years I went really intense on all of that stuff, and now I'm kind of at the point where I'm done. I'm just here. Like, I don't need any. I just want, like, I'm good. And I think there'll be a point again where you start to pick stuff back up again. I think you have to be, I talked in my earlier podcast about the coaching way of being. And I think as a human being, to your point of not rushing ahead and doing stuff, or just actually being, this is me. And I'm in a relationship now with somebody who is so polar opposite. They're military. They're in the military. Very, very different. I mean, we are literally like this. And that has been such an interesting way for me to observe, like, also how difficult it is to be with someone who's done zero work and has been through, has been on, in and still in difficult situations and war zones and whatever. And then you're someone like me who's done, like, all of this deep work. And actually it's probably it is not annoying, but for someone who's constantly, like, trying to, let's explore this. What does it, it must be like, like, it's just an argument, Ruth. Right. Okay. So I wrote about this in my Substack the other week, and I've never it's taken me time to be able to be open about that relationship, because it was something for a long time that I just really wanted to protect and kind of cultivate. But really interesting to see the difference with somebody who is in that world that actually could do with lots of that, or could have done with it throughout their career particularly as well. But just it's like it's still taboo in that world, right? It's still very much taboo. And sadly, we see lots of grief and loss in that world still, and through own people who've taken their own lives as well. And I just think it's really tough. Like, it's tough to do the work. It's tough to be with somebody as they do the work too, right? As a partner of someone who's started, to your point about why is it, of course it's a complex grief, right? But that's why the support mechanism, whether that's a friend, a family member, yes, you need your professionals, but you need other people around you. And I think that can also be really hard. It's really isolating to do it on your own. Yeah. And it's not easy to support someone who is doing that, because they're finding out things about themselves that were always there, or might have, like, to your point, childhood trauma or life experience that have inadvertently subconsciously made decisions for them, behaviors that have come about. That's why I always say as well, the fact you've not unpacked it, don't think that doesn't mean it's not influencing you somehow.
No, absolutely. That's like an argument I can have with the older generations, like, any day, like, oh, why do you need to go to the past? Because you have to. It's not because you don't speak about it that it's not impacting you and the people around you. It's like, you have to do it for your children, for the people around you, for humanity. No, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. A last question for today. Let's think a bit of the people who maybe are in the thick of it right now. Like maybe they've lost someone, maybe there's a season of difficulty, and they're in business, so they still have to keep going. Maybe the breadwinner, like I am, so they still have to send those sales emails. They still have to show up for the clients, etc. What would you actually say to them? What's possible when falling apart is not an option?
So, two things. That's a really good question, actually. So there's two things that I would say to this. One is figure out what your, I want to say bare minimum is. Like, what is your like I said, I described it before as transactional. So I kept myself, I have, sole earner, no savings, like to kind of like delve into to pay for that, to keep the business going. So in that time between summer of 2023 and probably spring of 2024, so almost a year. But just think about, like, what are you doing that is your bare minimum that keeps yourself afloat, right? And find ways as much as you can that you work with your own energy levels and kind of like how best that suits you. And this is where the load of self-compassion comes, right? On the days that you really struggle, the days you need to have a lie down, or the days that you just think, I can't do it. There's also something about how do you nudge yourself, your behavioral activation to kick your own butt a little bit, because you still need to do that, right? And maybe it is, I'm going to send 5 emails and log off. And that's, set yourself some doable targets around that. I think that's really important. And it's not easy. Look into ways that you can support yourself. I mean, I could have, taken time off, and I've got policies that pay for stuff and things like that. But I felt that I was capable of doing that at a transactional level. And then again is making sure you've got that support. So that professional support as well. I think it's good to have that you can have a non-judgmental space to offload, because I think we were chatting about this off air, but like, friends and family are amazing, partners are amazing, all the people that love and care for us. But also to the point of sometimes it is, how much can they take? How much time and energy do they have, respectfully? Like, as much as we want to be there for people, and we do, everyone has their own boundaries. Everyone has their own limits, right? Because life is complex and busy for everybody. And that's not to say people aren't there for you. But I think when you're paying, and this is the point, you're paying for someone, you're paying for a therapist, counselor, a coach, whoever that is in your world, that can give you a space to unpack, just to get stuff out, put yourself back together, and keep moving. I feel like you're moving forwards on that journey at the same time as just trying to keep, money coming in. It's never easy being self-employed. And I think this is probably one of the biggest things about, and I have this financial setup and privilege to be able to do it, that if something happens to me long term, I can, get somebody else in to cover, etc. But I think we have to be, women particularly are really bad at this as well. So how do you know if something happens in the future? How are you, so for those who are also going through it now, but in the future, how do you prepare yourself for this? Like, what's your strategy? And, maybe it's even paying for, like, I've had assistants all of this time, like, an EA, and just having somebody that can field emails or can go back to people on your behalf, somebody that you can work really collaboratively with, is really helpful as well. And that's not always possible, again, depending on how much you earn. But actually that kind of support is that gatekeeper, and just on the days that you are really struggling, who can just hold the fort for you a little bit. That's huge as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that for me, I said that, I coped by going back to my business and recreating it and reinventing it. You were talking earlier about that kick in the butt. To me, that was a kick in the butt, and it gave me a sense of control. And it's interesting because I was talking with people at that time that was saying, but you've gone through this, you need to maybe just, maybe wait a bit, or get a real job, a 9-to-5 job, because at least you're not with the uncertainty of how you're going to know. Yeah. But I want to work from home. I want to work online, and it's not so easy today. So I did try that route, and I was like, I'm applying to lots of things. It's not giving me results. and I'm just waiting for something outside to come and save me, really. And I'm going to save myself, like that's it. I'm going to go back. And so that really, really helped me somehow to have this goal, even, I know I could have given myself more space, etc., etc. But I think it really helped me to pick me up from the floor. When I say the floor, it's not an image. I spent 2 weeks on the floor with meditation in my ears. And I was just, doing this grief protocol and talking to my dad and angels. And people thought I was going crazy because I was talking about angels. And I would do that 3 to 4 hours per day. And it's the only thing I could do. I put my kids in front of TV and I was on the floor like that. And I was sometimes crying, sometimes not. And then, work picked me up, really. And I want to add this thing, like, because we've been through it, and my partner as well has been through grief. We know what it's like. We know how it's really stressful if you have to worry about money in these moments. It's really opened our eyes. Because, we're in this generation, a bit of YOLO, I think. We're like, you know what, we need to have like death insurance and life insurance.
Yeah.
To make sure, like, if something happens to me, of course, everyone will be already in a terrible, emotional challenge. They might as well not have to worry about covering for what I would have brought for a certain amount of time. I'm talking here for people who have families and even partners. I think it's really, it really, this is my way of like, okay, I can't control if I'm gone or not, but I'm doing this for my family in case something happens.
I love the idea of like, one, I love the fact that worked for you. Like, this is the thing about healing, grieving, just being like, finding if it works for you, like, don't question it, right? If it's health, like if it's a form of coping and it helps you, like, that's amazing. I love that. And that's kind of the stuff that I would do. And secondly, I love the fact you found, like, it gave you a purpose. And I think sometimes that's what we do need. And that is literally what I did do at the end of, I was in such this state of like, everything was burning to the ground in 2023. And I was like, this makes the perfect time. I had a loss of identity as well. And actually I took a very well-established consultancy with lots, 20 odd people. Everyone went. Business Re changed its name. And my friend, actually saw a friend last week for lunch I haven't seen for about a year. And she said that was the bravest thing. She said so many people wouldn't have done that. Like, literally went to all my major clients and said, look, I'm going to rebrand. It's just going to be me for a bit. If you want to leave, leave. And these are like big corporates. And they were all like, it's all, no, it's fine. Don't worry. We've got your back. And I started 2024. 1st of Jan was just me. And that was like huge. But if you like, I don't know, I just felt that was everything else, the phoenix and the ashes. I just had that image. It was very much like, it was like everything's just on fire. Let's just set the whole, you just think, oh,
you don't have a choice.
It's up. Yeah.
Up from you can't go down anymore.
Yeah, so let's just go for it. But actually that made sense to me. And I think, but that gave me, it really ignited my sense of like, but then the 2024 to 2026 has been very much like an embryonic kind of figuring out what's next, and still in that phase. That took it's taken 2 years for me to really feel like this year was, okay, I'm back. Like, this feels good. I feel good. Like, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Or sometimes we want the quick fix. It just doesn't, it doesn't exist. Like,
no, and we shouldn't wait for it. Like, just walk imperfectly forward. You'll figure it out at some point. And when you figure it out, for me, that's my life pattern. You figure it out and then you're like, you know what? No, I'm going to do something. But that's another topic. I've loved
this conversation. It's been so much fun. We were like, it's going to be 25 minutes.
Yeah, no, in the end, we just chatted, but it's also part of like the vibe I want for this podcast as well. Like, it's so conversations more than just like, oh, it's an interview and it's so polished and everything. No, it's like we're having a coffee chat and people can listen to that. And I really felt like we've connected today.
Oh, it's been
Thank you
so
so much.
No,
it's been lovely
too.
I've really
enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for your time, for your wisdom, for all your heart that you brought to the table. I'll put all of your links in the replay description. If you're listening to the podcast, you can find Ruth's links in the description of the podcast as well. And, well, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.